How was the Sister Wives family going public received by other polygamists? Hey heathens, I'm the Fresh King Benjamin, comedian, prophet, and heathen. I grew up deep in the Mormon cult on a polygamous compound, and then I escaped into the wicked world just in time for the apocalypse. I also happen to be one of the dozens of nephews of the Sister Wives family, and I'm watching the show for the first time and responding to it here. This is my response to Season 2, Episode 1, where the Cody and the wives go to New York to come out on national television on something called Good Morning America. I'm assuming you guys know what that is. Is it a podcast? The quote from today's episode comes from Cody. He says, "You're supposed to drop everything and come running to me." He's joking when he says this, but he's saying the quiet part of the patriarchal cult that raised him out loud. By the way, before I jump into my review, a couple quick announcements from me. First, I wrote a short story about what it was like to grow up on the compound called My Dad Still Owes Me a Pig, and it's currently on sale on my website for the month of July for $3.33. If you want that, you know where to find it. Also, I'm going to be filming my very first comedy special. I'm very excited. The end of this month, July 26th and 27th at Wise Guys in Salt Lake City. So if you're local and you want to come out and join me for a night of loud laughter and maybe some evil speaking of the Lord's anointed, that would be really fun. Tickets are available right now on Wise Guys' website, wiseguyscomedy.com, and there are only 160 of them. So if you want to come, you'll need to get your tickets ASAP before they're sold out. On to the episode. So this episode begins with the family's decision to send most of their kids to public school as out polygamists. And I don't know that this is true, but I suspect that one of the reasons that they decided to send the kids to school was because of the show. They wanted to seem more normal for the show, because part of the purpose of the show is to make polygamy seem fun and interesting and totally normal. In fact, Cody even goes so far as to say that, polyglets are just regular kids, just like any other kids, which I profoundly disagree with. Look, I love polyglets. I am a polyglet. And polyglets aren't like regular kids, just like any other kids. Polyglets have probably been brainwashed, neglected, and insulated from society. Let's talk about the brainwashing. The family has already talked about several times on the show how before this, most of their kids used to go to a polygamous school run by the AUB, or the Apostolic United Brethren. Now, I didn't attend that school because I was homeschooled in between being labor trafficked in my parents' bakery. More on that in my response to episode 2. But based on my knowledge of the culture and thinking of the AUB, I can say with certainty that the education that they received there differed from the standard American education in significant ways. Evolution, for example. The AUB is very anti-evolution. I was taught growing up that dinosaurs, which I was obsessed with, were the remains of other planets that God had used when he created this Earth 6,000 years ago. And yes, the Earth is definitely 6,000 years old, so history class started with the Bible and emphasized that when it came to American history, the reason that God founded America with those righteous and definitely not racist founding fathers was to prepare the way for the founding of Mormonism. Because that's the second big piece of brainwashing that all polyglets receive, is the overwhelming importance of Mormonism and the idolization of its founder, Joseph Smith. I remember growing up that my dad would say all the time that his number one ambition in life was to be able to introduce his children to the prophet Joseph Smith after he died. So I guess his number one ambition in life wasn't actually a life ambition, it was a death ambition. Thanks, Dad. And we see this idolization of Joseph Smith very clearly in this episode when the family decides to go ice blocking. I don't know if that's a thing out here in the wicked world, if you guys do that or not, but the reason that Mormons do it is because it was one of Joseph Smith's favorite games, like stick pulling and leg wrestling. So we love to do it because brother Joseph loved to do it. And wasn't he such a hilarious man of the people and definitely not an abusive cult leader? I mean, he played games just like us. Those are just a couple examples of the brainwashing. Let's talk neglect. I feel like I hit this in every response to every episode, but polyglets are neglected children. And let's say neglected at best. And neglect, as we all know, is a type of abuse. When everyone is having as many children as they possibly can to save all the spirit babies from coming down to wicked families in the world like yours, those kids do not get adequate physical, mental, or emotional care. It just doesn't happen. Children need a lot of attention as they develop. And if you're a part-time dad and a bunch of semi-single moms, the kids just fall through the cracks. My dad has 16 children. Think about that for a little bit. 16 children. There aren't enough hours in the waking day for everyone to get time with him. It's just impossible. Love is not multiplied. It is divided. Polyglets are also really different from other kids because they've been insulated from society. Some of them physically, like me and my siblings, where we grew up on a ranch 5 miles outside of the nearest town and left the ranch basically for church and to work. Some, like the Browns and Sister Wives, live in a town, but they're insulated by being told that they're different. Remember the family council where they sat everyone down and told them they were going to public school and it was going to be weird because they were polygamists? That insulated them from society. Now they're different. And why are they different? Because their family is living the super secret, super special higher laws. So they might interact and make friends with the Gentiles, but they'll never forget that they're different. And the puncturing of this insulation, I think, is one of the more positive outcomes of the Sister Wives show. And I don't know that this was intentional or even worth the cost to the mental health of my family members on the show, but Sister Wives did make polygamist world a more public one and therefore a little less isolated, which I guess was actually one of the intentions that Cody and the wives had going into it, and I think it worked. Polygamy is now in the public eye more than it ever has been, and that's created space for people like me to tell true stories about what that world is really like. I just wish that transparency hadn't come at such a deep personal cost to my family. Another difference between polyglets and normal kids is the abundance of grandmas. We meet my grandma Cheryl in this episode as she comes down to watch the kids while the adults go out to New York. No word on if she brought my grandpa's John Wayne movies, but I bet they had a great time with her. It's fun watching the wives enjoy New York City. It reminds me of the first time that I went there, and I fucking love that place. The overwhelming energy of all the humans, so much happening. It was such a contrast to the boring compound that I was raised on. It did surprise me that they all knew who Meredith was. I still don't. And that's an example of how different levels of control and sheltering can be, even in the same family. Apparently, they were watching TV at Cody's house. At my house, we never got TV, and we only started watching very carefully selected movies in like 1995. The big question on the interview is, what made you choose polygamy? And the answer that Cody gave was honest, but I feel incomplete. He says it was faith-based. They were acting out of faith belief. What that means in Mormonism, if you listen to the words of the founding prophets like Joseph Smith and Brigham Young, the only way you can get to the tippy top of Mormon heaven and be a god and get to make spirit babies for eternity is if you enter the new and everlasting covenant of marriage, which is polygamy. No polygamy, no spirit babies. That's how it works. After coming out in New York, they head back to Utah just in time for a bigamy investigation, which I imagine was as stressful as it looked. They were going into this believing that they were doing God's will, so I imagine that having the police investigate you after that would make you feel like maybe God doesn't have your back. Although with the persecution complex that runs so deeply in Mormonism, maybe it actually strengthened their testimony. Look how righteous we are. That's why all these people hate us. And that stress starts to impact the children immediately. I had to change locations, my iPhone was getting too hot. But that stress is hitting the kids immediately because they're getting pressure from all sides, not just from the world, but also from the community. Because most of the polygamists were not thrilled when the Browns went public. There were definitely a core group of us that were pretty excited about the idea of, the world being a little less insular, but most polygamists have been raised in an environment of fear, and they were freaked out when the Browns went public. And how do you manage all of that pressure, plus all the pressure of a police investigation when you have 16 kids? You can't. So you gather them into a public council and you try to do it all at once in batch. And sometimes you use the older kids as bait for the paparazzi, which is another great example of the toxic parentification that happens in Mormonism. The family council at the end of the show is really heartbreaking for me because the children's privacy has been shattered forever. Strangers will know their names, they may not be their friends, dad might go to jail, which means even less time with him, and the moms are even more stressed than usual. And why? Why is this all happening? Why all of the suffering? Because they have a religious commitment to a predatory and false religion, Mormonism. Because they're the latest victims in 7 generations of oppression in a cult that was started by Joseph Smith, a super down-to-earth guy who loved ice blocking and definitely didn't want to start polygamy. That's why God had to threaten him with an angel with a burning sword. So that's it for this episode. If you want a little more texture to my personal life as a compound child, check out my Dad Still Owes Me a Pig, on sale right now on my website. It's my autobiographical short story about what it was like to grow up there. It's on sale for $3.33 for the rest of the month. And if you're local to Salt Lake, please come out and join me in my comedy special filming on July 26th and 27th at Wise Guys in Salt Lake City. Peace.